Hello YouTube. Today I want to look at an article posted by a friend of mine on Facebook. Cafe Group unveils billboard about male victims of domestic abuse, accuses Ontario of forgetting about them. Sounds interesting. Let's look at the billboard. I for one think that's a great message. I especially like that it highlights how when women abuse their male partners, it often takes the form of verbal abuse. At this point, I'll mention I looked up the authors of the article. One is an intern and the other has no noticeable biases that I could find. So let's dive into the article. Calling the Ontario government's campaign against sexual violence sexist, a men's issues group unveiled a new billboard in downtown Toronto Monday in an attempt to draw attention to male victims of domestic abuse. The men's issues group described is called CAFE, which stands for the Canadian Association for Equality. Let's look at how they describe themselves. The Canadian Association for Equality is committed to achieving equality for all Canadians, regardless of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, etc., etc. Sounds a lot like how a lot of feminists define feminism, eh? In particular, we are interested in gender equality. That is, on achieving equality for all men, women, girls, and boys. While we support all efforts at achieving gender equality, we will work for balance and fairness within this societal project by focusing our limited resources on those areas of gender which are understudied in contemporary culture. This has led us to a current focus on the status, health, and well-being of boys and men, where attention, investment, and support for educational and social programs stand at a level that is far from equal to the seriousness of the problem, while also being significantly underdeveloped compared to the resources in other important areas of social improvement. Well, that sounds reasonable, but I can see why the article refers to them as a men's issues group, considering their entire focus is on men for the time being. Let's continue with the article. The billboard comes after Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne, pictured here, released a 3-year, $41 million plan to combat sexual violence last week. This campaign, spurred in part by the high-profile sex assault allegations against Jian Ghomeshi, includes a video ad with staggering scenes of women being sexually assaulted and harassed. We're gonna watch that ad at the end. It's terrible. In a news release Monday, CAFE accused Premier Wynne of forgetting half the victims of violence. Premier Kathleen Wynne's Violence Against Women initiative reinforces sexist stereotypes that ignore violence against men, gays, lesbians, and endangers children with abusive mothers, the statement reads. But declaring that men make up half of domestic violence victims oversimplifies a complex set of statistics, as one women's advocate noted. Well, that took a rather feminist turn, didn't it? If service providers were finding that there was such a need for men's shelters, there would be men's shelters, says Penny Crowitz, executive director of Act to End Violence Against Women. If we had enough men coming forward saying, I need shelter from this abusive woman, or I need shelter from this situation, do you not think that we would have provided those services to men? Is this person serious? Penny, you run an organization devoted to ending all violence against women, and only women. You don't see why no men come to you for help and support? What are men supposed to do? Show up at a woman-only shelter and demand help? Men don't come forward because there's no place for them to come forward to. Plus, society keeps telling them that men are never the victims of domestic abuse. I mean, if there were, then there would be men's shelters, right? Oh, wait. Man who runs Canada's only shelter dedicated solely to male victims of domestic abuse dies in apparent suicide. Mr. Silverman closed his shelter last month, saying he could no longer afford its upkeep. He long sought funding for provincial and federal governments to help run his hybrid shelter and home, but believed he was always refused because the space was dedicated to helping male victims and their children. He said he was unable to pay for heat and grocery bills. When I went into the community looking for support services, I couldn't find any. There were a lot for women, and the only programs for men were for anger management. Mr. Silverman told the Post shortly before his death. As a victim, I was re-victimized by having these services tell me that I wasn't a victim, but I was a perpetrator. So Ms. Penny Crowitz can be pretty much dismissed as a sexist and overall bad person for the reasoning she presented in her quote here. Moving on. In backing up its claim, Cafe cites a 2009 Statistics Canada survey that found an estimated 601,000 Canadian women and 585,000 men experience spousal violence. This study, however, also notes that women are twice as likely to be physically injured during spousal abuse than men, and almost 7 times as likely to fear for their lives. Yes, so men are on average physically stronger than women, and women are more likely to admit to a researcher that they have feared for their lives. These are not valid reasons for focusing on only female victims of domestic abuse. The latest data from the Canadian Centre for Justice Statistics found that the majority of police-reported spousal and family violence was against women. Women were the victims of nearly 80% of the cases of intimate partner violence reported to the police in 2013, the study found. And women between 20 and 24 were 6 times more likely to be victims of intimate partner violence than men the same age. No. Women are 6 times more likely to be victims of violence that gets reported to the police. How common is it, do you think, for men to report abuse to the police? Let's see. We live in a society where the abuse of men is never acknowledged and often even denied. There are viral videos out there showing that many people find domestic abuse of men to be funny. Plus, if the police show up and it's he said, she said, who do you think they're gonna believe? And Cafe agrees with me. But those figures are based on police reports, Cafe spokesman Justin Trottier said, noting the Centre for Justice Statistics report itself finds female victims are 3 times more likely than males to state that they had reported the incident to the police. In other words, there is an important scholarly debate about the rates of victimization, severity, and reporting, Mr. Trottier said in an email, but the idea that male victimization is non-existent and can be safely ignored is to neglect to support a group of people in need. Now, the article goes on, but I think we get the gist of it. At least one of the authors thinks domestic abuse of men is not as important as that of women, but I hope we can all agree that that idea is full of shit. Now, let's watch the ridiculous ad released by the Ontario government to sell their new anti-sexual violence plan.
Thanks for keeping your mouth shut.
Thanks for minding your own business.
Come on, show me the good ones. Thanks for not telling my girlfriend. Send that to me.
Hi.
Thanks for not telling anyone.
When you do nothing, you're helping him. But when you do something, you help her.
Thanks for telling the bartender.
Thanks for stopping him.
Thanks for telling HR.
Thanks for getting help.
Who will you help? Stop sexual harassment and violence when you see it.
So, what did you think of that? Leave your comments about that or any other part of the video below. Like, dislike, subscribe, or share as you see fit. And I wish you all the best.